Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Hi there, thank you for joining me. I hope that you and your pups are well. Today, I am joined by Canine First Aid Guru Rachel Bean. Rachel is a registered veterinary nurse who delivers workshops and the iPET Network's Ofqual Level 3 course in Canine First Aid. Initially, Rachel started giving first aid trainings for vet staff and quickly grew to provide invaluable training for other pet professionals and pet parents like you and me to be able to offer our fur babies the first line of necessary care in the event of an emergency. Now, first aid training is one of those things that we don't necessarily think about or prioritize when we're looking at how to best nourish our dogs, but it's incredibly important and it's incredibly empowering when you know that you can help your dog if something does happen. Rachel shares with us some really helpful tips on how to handle common issues that she sees in veterinary practice, like bleeding, choking, how to perform CPR, how to treat paw pad burns, and really importantly, she dispels some common myths when it comes to treating your dog of suspected heat stroke. Rachel also shares some basic things to have in your dog's first aid kit so that you're prepared in the event of an emergency. So get your notepad and your pen out because you're going to want to take some notes. But before we dive in, just a quick note that this episode is sponsored by Aspirationary, which in full transparency is another project of mine where we create books, notebooks, and stationery to support you in becoming all you aspire to be. I'm really excited to announce that we have released a Spanish language version of our popular My First Period tracker for young girls and tweens in order to increase menstrual literacy and empower young people to become advocates for their menstrual health. You can learn more about our books on our Instagram, which is Aspirationary, spelled Aspirationery. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast. I am thrilled to have you here for what I think is a really important and often overlooked conversation all about first aid for our dogs.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking me. Yeah, especially getting all around the world. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I love too that you have practiced first aid and learned first aid in a variety of different contexts, different cultural contexts. And I think it's going to be a
Yes.
really rich conversation today with how we think about and approach first aid. And like I said, I think it's something that we don't think about until something happens, in which case it's too late to prepare ourselves for that. So I wanted to bring you on so that we can kind of insert this conversation into the library of resources that we're creating at Mystic Dog Mama so that pet parents can kind of make that checklist of, oh, these are things that I need to be considering and have in the household and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to dive in from your perspective too, of the things that we might not think about that we need to think about when it comes to first aid. So I think this is going to be a really rich and helpful conversation today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just sort of briefly start with me, really. Long time ago, it feels like a million years ago, but I actually started the Dogs Trust, which is one of the big rehoming charities in the UK. And that was between 1994 and 96. I was assistant kennel manager. I left there after a couple of years, or just less than a couple of years, because I really wanted to follow veterinary medicine. And so I just applied within a 100-mile radius to train as a veterinary nurse. So in the UK, it takes sort of 2.5 to 3 years to train as a vet nurse. And actually, we've got a massive shortage of vet nurses at the moment. So we're always trying to recruit. Yeah, straight into practice in 96. And then I've been ever since, really. I've never left practice. I do work less hours today. I tend to do Mondays and Tuesdays in practice, but I will certainly cover if there's somebody off or on holiday and what have you. Yeah. So my journey really started at the Dogs Trust and then straight into veterinary practice and been there ever since. But yeah, as you mentioned, I've done lots of traveling and worked in sort of shelter environments around the world, which I gained a lot more experience in teaching and in veterinary medicine, really. Yeah.
Mm. And
That's
you're
me.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you're kind of seen as like a go-to expert, particularly in the UK when it comes to first aid for our pets. And I wondered, how did you get into that specifically? What made you want to focus on that and
Yeah.
bring it to the level that you have brought it to?
Yeah, I think how it started was I just started doing some staff training for local RSPCA branches, within in the town that was at, just staff training, just freebies really. And then another branch says, "Oh, can you do our staff training?" And then I was enjoying it, so I just thought, we could probably expand this a bit more and have it as branch of my work really. So yeah, it's taken. Probably, I've been teaching maybe 17, 18 years now, maybe longer actually, maybe just short of 20 years. And it's got to a point now where I've written an Ofqual level 3 qualification. So now it's the only recognised qualification in the UK via iPET Network, which is the kind of education body that I use. I'm one of their consultants. So yeah, we're just trying to get it. I don't think it'll ever achieve it, but we're trying to get it mandatory for pet professionals, dog sitters, dog walkers, doggy daycare staff, dog groomers, etc. Trying to get it mandatory because obviously looking after high volumes of dogs, then you've got more of a chance of something happening, and it does happen. It does happen. Yeah. So yeah, I do try and kind of be the guru of canine first aid. The problem, well, not a problem really. What's happened over the last 5 years is that there's a lot more people teaching it, which is great. On one side, the more pet owners we get, even just the basics. But I'm very passionate about it being accurate. The CPR's got to be accurate, and heat stroke's got to be accurate, and things like that. So that's where my passion lies within teaching canine first aid. It's got to be correct. Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty firm about that.
Hmm.
Yeah, because there was a lot of people teaching it, and yeah, some of it is not brilliant. So just trying
Yeah.
trying to get it correct, really. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I think that's really important. I actually think that's something that puts a lot of pet parents off is the fear of doing it wrong. And
Mm,
so that's why I
yeah,
think it'll be helpful to talk to you today about what are some things that they can be considering, because I think you don't want to be in that situation where you're just afraid of learning it and then you actually really need it. It's like
yes.
if we can take the fear away now and encourage
Mm.
people to go and learn the practices, it will benefit them and it will benefit their dogs.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think it will ever prepare you for when something does happen, but you're going to be part way there if you have taken a course, whether it be face to face or an online course. And you certainly react differently if it's your own dog than if it's a dog that you're looking after. But you've got different priorities when it's a dog that you're looking after because the pet parents will expect the pet carer to know what to do, and you'll certainly be questioned after the event if you didn't do anything. Yeah, so definitely, even just a little preparation can then see you in good stead for if something does happen. So
Yeah.
it's all about making the journey easier for you, but also for the animal as well, is to get that like with human medicine, you've got that critical time where you can save a life, and and you have to step in very, very quickly if it's a dire emergency, yeah, to get you to the vets.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, would you be able to kind of walk us through today some things that you think are the most important things to consider as you're
Mm,
teaching pet parents? Because that will be mostly who's going to be listening to this is pet
yeah.
parents
Yes. Yeah.
about the things that they need to know, in your opinion. What are the most important things that they need to know in
Yeah, sure.
first aid with their dogs?
Yeah, I think I always start my courses off sort of with the same kind of format really, and initially it's making sure that you know where your veterinary practices is and where the emergency practices are. Obviously, every country is going to be slightly different. Here in the UK, we're kind of lucky that it feels that we have like a vets on every street corner, and the hospitals are usually within quarter of an hour, 20 minutes drive, usually unless you're really remote, such as Highlands of Scotland or somewhere like that. But that's part of the preparation is knowing where your vets are located, but also knowing where your out of hours vets are, because the general first opinion vets might only be open. The one that I work at is open 8:30 in the morning till 6:30. So if you turn up at a vet's at 29 minutes past 8 with an emergency, the chances of the vets being there can be pretty slim, because the vets might not turn in till 10 to 9. They might not be consulting till 9 o'clock. So in that case, there's going to be no vet on the premises. That means we're going to have to turn you around and send you to the out of hours. So that's one thing I do talk about. Where there's an overlap at each end of the day, don't turn up at a vet at 1 minute to 7 if they shut at 7, because the vets might have left at 6:30. Is always go straight to the out of hours where there's a full team, 24 hours. And even with that, make sure that you're registered with them. Make sure that you know the driving distances, you know their contact numbers, you know what they do out of hours. So it's part of the journey is already sorted. Then is what happens, how and when I get to the vets. Yeah, and then the other thing that I talk about as well is making sure that you've got the finances in place as well. In the UK, we try and encourage pet insurance. Different countries around the world is going to have different criteria with that. I know Asia doesn't really have that type of culture where the pets are insured, although I'm sure it will come in the cities, especially India, because it's really up and coming. Pet industry in India, especially in the cities. I've certainly experienced that. So it might be that it creeps in those types of countries, but it's having finances. Veterinary medicine is very expensive in the UK. It's rocketed. There's lots of complaining about it, which I totally get. It is through the roof, really. But you have to have that all sorted as well with either pet insurance or putting money aside, or credit cards and things like that. The problem I always explain with putting money aside, the idea would be that you have sort of an amount first. And then you add to it, because if you just start with nothing and put money aside a month, it actually takes a lot of years to accrue an amount of money for normal emergencies. I always use this calculation. If you put £50 a month away, it takes 10 years to accrue £6,000, which can be the cost of an average emergency or medical issue. Yeah, so that's the thing, is know where your vets are and finances as well. So that's what I always set off with. And then I always set off with the Veterinary Surgeons Act. Every country tends to have these different acts. In the UK, it's the Veterinary Surgeons Act. So if pet parents are looking after their own dog and something happens, they're well within the Veterinary Surgeons Act to carry out emergency first aid, or if a neighbour comes and helps, as long as they're helping the dog survive, so they're potentially saving the dog's life, they're preventing suffering and preventing deterioration of the patient's condition, they're actually within the boundaries of the Veterinary Surgeons Act. So with different countries, it's always worth looking up to see if that country has something similar, and that you're working within the boundaries of that as well. Yeah. So that's what we always set off with, is have things in place, because there's nothing worse than an event happening and then it adds to the panic if you're not prepared, if you don't have the finances, if you don't know where the vets are, if you're not registered with the vets. It all adds to the journey of making it a bit of a disaster. Definitely.
Yeah.
And we do get it at work. We get people running in with serious incidents such as road traffic accidents or dog fights and things like that, and just not registered with us, no financial situation. So it can just make it just a little bit more difficult, the journey. For everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as you're bringing those things up too, it makes me think as well of having that information available, like readily accessible to, in case you're having somebody that's come into your house to watch the dog, or,
Yes.
so if you're not present when something happens, that somebody else has all of that information that is present with your dog.
Yeah, definitely. And we sometimes find that as well, owners might go away and then leave the dog in the care with a neighbour or a relative, and then they haven't given them, especially in the UK because of the GDPR and data protection, we're not allowed to discuss or give permission to treat that dog unless we have permission from the owner. So if the neighbour brings a dog in, we can't do anything because we need permission. So they have to have what's called a vet release form. So that means the pet parent has to let the vet know, right, Sheila from next door is looking after the dog for 2 weeks. Can you put her on the records, and we give you permission to discuss anything health-wise with the dog. Yeah.
Oh, that's really helpful to know. I wasn't
Yeah.
aware of that. Oh, that's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, might not be the same in other countries, but certainly GDPR and things like that is really strict in the UK. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So
Mm.
in terms of things that you see quite often that pet parents come across
Mm.
in terms of kind of like emergency situations that they
Yes.
need to deal with, what are the top ones that you see?
Yeah, I think probably up there, which can always be life-threatening, is anything bleeding. If you're bleeding, you're losing oxygen. If you lose oxygen, then you go into shock, hypovolemic shock, and then you can die from that. So we see serious bleeding from cut feet as a common one, so glass cuts. Yes, we get a lot of little minor ones that just bleed a little bit and might leave little splodges. But when you get a piece of glass that cuts right through the pads, right through tendons, right through the major blood supply, then certainly they can bleed to a point where potentially the dog will collapse and potentially die as well. So anything bleeding, the main instructions are straightforward, although it might not be that easy in the situation. You have to stop the bleeding. So by whatever means, you need to get pressure on that wound and stop the bleeding. You have to stop the blood escaping, because oxygen then depletes, and the dog really sort of volume wise, blood volume is a lot different to us. It's a lot less. So they do lose a lot of blood very quickly, and then that can have a quicker detrimental effect. And anything arterial, they're going to bleed a lot quicker, because arterial blood is under a lot of pressure. It's often high volumes at high pace. It's often spurting. It's often frothy. Yeah. You just have to get your hands on it initially. Don't be faffing around for 5 minutes looking for a bandage. You have to get your hands on it and pressure either with the palms of your hand or fingers like that, what we call direct digital pressure. So you're getting your hands on it first, then think about, right, what we're going to do now, call for help, etc., etc. So that's why it's always a good idea to have like first aid kits and things like that, which have got bandages in that you can put pressure on. But again, you might have to put extra pressure on with hands on top of the bandage, etc. Tourniquets can be used. The problem with tourniquets with dogs is that their anatomy doesn't really lend itself very well for really good tourniqueting, because of the muscle mass. So let's say you had a femoral bleed on the inside of the back leg, and you put a tourniquet and you tie it, it'll just slide to the next joint because of the muscle mass. So you can certainly support it by putting a tourniquet above a joint, which is above any wound, but you're mainly going to have to use your hands. Yeah. And the most commonest bleeding areas that we tend to get, apart from feet, tends to be in definitely three areas, and it's the major arteries. So one of the arteries is called the brachial artery. So the brachial artery is the one that splits in from the heart, splits in the chest, and then feeds the dog's front legs. So if you look in your own armpit in a mirror, you'll see a big blue artery there. That's the brachial artery. So humans tend to damage it when they're maybe climbing railings, something like that, and slip, and the railing goes in their armpit. What the paramedic will do will pack it, and then tell the person to keep their arm down like that, and it will potentially press on the artery and slow the bleeding down. Obviously, we can't tell a dog to do that, but what we can do, we can pack it. So the easiest thing is to put a ball in there, a tennis ball or a rubber ball, jam it in the dog's armpit, keep it there as hard as you possibly can, and that will help reduce the blood loss, blood flow. If the dog's small, you can put something in like a rolled up sock or something and jam it in the dog's armpit, and that will help reduce the blood loss. But that tends to be with dogs when they're running through woodlands, running onto sharp branches. That's a common one. And it goes either through there or they land on it. It's common in the UK with working dogs, such as gun dogs and things like that. If they're working in the field, they go over a fence, get stuck on top of the fence post, and the fence post goes in the armpit. That's a common one. Other arteries in the dog is the one, the femoral arteries, also inside of the back legs. Again, that can be broken branches hooked up on barbed wire, but the other big one is dog fights. When dogs fight, sometimes it's just a lot of noise. It's handbags, isn't it? But when you get the next step where dogs are like in primitive and their hindbrain and they're trying to kill that other dog, the bites tend to be in certain places. So they tend to be throat, abdomen, inside of the back legs and genitals. So when you get serious fights that are to kill, then that's where the bites tend to be. So obviously they instinctively know what's going to make the most damage the quickest. A lot of it's genetics as well. There's a bit of a swing at the moment to not blame genetics, but we have to some degree we have to agree that bull breeds fight differently to a border collie. Just the intensity, the strength, where they bite is completely different. So you'd expect more damage from certain breeds than other breeds, definitely. Yeah. And the other artery that's quite common is the artery that goes through the tail. So that's called the coccygeal artery or the caudal artery. And injuries, we see those a lot in Asia because the dogs are laid at the side of the road. So if they don't get out the way in time, a vehicle might go over the tail and cause a partial or a full sever. But in the UK, it tends to be where tails have been trapped in doorways or car boot lids, especially estate cars. Dog jumps in, tail's hanging out, boot lid goes down. With that one, easier to tourniquet because obviously you can just put the tourniquet above the wound, tie it really tightly, and then off to the vets. Yeah, and tourniquets just use just while I'm on about tourniquets, just use whatever you've got on you. If we're out and about, not anywhere near our first aid kit, normally if we're walking dogs, we've got boots or trainers on. You can pull a bootlace out, or sort of out your tie out your hoodie or a scrunchie out your hair, anything like that, get it on really tightly. And they're saying now you can leave it on 2 hours. So leave it on for 2 hours, and in that time you're going to be at the vets anyway. You don't have to now undo it every 15 minutes and things like that. Just put it on, leave it on, and then get to the vets. Yeah. So yeah, that would be top of my list is bleeding, stop any bleeding. And that's the same with human first aid as well. Yeah. Yeah. It's just losing oxygen is life-threatening. Yeah.
No, that's really helpful, Rachel. Thank you. Because also thinking about those different contexts, I wouldn't have necessarily thought about. You think like, oh, a nice little walk in the woods, that'll be really lovely. And then to think, oh God, the potential dangers and hazards there of it's not to put people off going and do that stuff. It's just being aware that that's a possibility.
Yeah, and especially it tends to happen more when the dog goes into chase mode. So it might be playing with its friends, or it takes off after a squirrel, rabbit, deer, something like that, and they're just focused on chase. They don't tend to see what they're running into, and that's when a lot of the accidents happen when the dogs are at full pelt. Yeah,
Exactly. And I was having some chats on the podcast about just that very issue of when they go into that kind of mode. And Simona Mueller was talking about how in her work with predation substitute training, that's one of the things that she tries to stop. But she said the issue is too with things like people who want to use horrible aversive things like shock collars or whatever like that in those sorts of situations. The dog can't even feel it because the body
no,
just goes
no.
full into like
Yeah, it's just adrenaline.
so
Yeah.
they wouldn't even feel that they've hurt themselves. Yeah.
No, no, they don't. And it's, I've seen some, injuries like that, and the dog's like wagging its tail, and like, it's like, oh my God, like, sit still. Yeah, it's
Okay.
amazing what adrenaline does, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. So after bleeding, what would be another thing that pet parents should look out for?
Yeah, I think I always like to cover obviously something that's life-threatening, which apart from really cold countries, probably isn't as an issue as your heat stroke. That is a killer, all right. And people get caught out, really quickly, and especially with brachycephalic breeds, anything flat face, because with them, a lot of it's about conformation. When we've shrunk them and flattened the face, their skulls are more wide than they are long. That means their tongue is more wide than it is long. When you get a normal shape dog, let's take a Labrador, for example, when it's getting warm, the tongue comes way out and it's lolling all over the place. It spatulates, so it spreads and goes like a spoon shape. So it's increasing surface area that it can evaporate and cool. These dogs can't really, they pant, but the tongue only comes like just over the end like that and it kind of goes upwards. But the other thing with these breeds is that And then in a normal dog's nasal passages, they've got turbinates, and the turbinates are like fine, bony, honeycomb areas where when air goes through them, it cools the air down, and vice versa. So there's a double whammy that they don't have a cooling system. So people get caught out very easily with that. And the temperature doesn't necessarily have to be high, it doesn't have to be like 25 or 28. It can be like 16, 17 degrees. And if the dog's doing exercise, then they can get into a situation. But also humidity as well, air quality is oxygen levels is important as well. Yeah. So I think at the moment there's a bit of a swing. Well, there is a swing at the moment to try and get rid of all the old myths about cooling dogs that are potentially getting into heat stroke, and we're trying to get rid of the myths now that you are not to cool the dog quickly because you'll put it into shock. That is actually wrong, right? So we'll go through that in a sec, but yeah, there's a scientist, I thought he was American actually, but he's British, Dr. David Marlin, and he does a lot of studies and work on thermoregulation with equines and canines. So he's been petitioning this for years. Actually, they did. I don't think he was involved with the studies, but I'm not entirely sure. There's a few people doing this study of over 4,000 dogs in heat stroke in 2016. And there was lots of data came out of that. But basically, yes, the cooling thing, you have to rapid cool the dog. They do that with other animals. They do it with racehorses. They do it with soldiers that are working in hot countries. They have a plunge pool and what have you. So yeah, we're definitely trying to get rid of this myth that you are not to cool the dog, cool the dog slowly. The dog is already in shock. It's in heat shock. You have to cool everything as quickly as possible. So two scenarios really. If you're close to the vets and you've got a dog that you think is in heat stroke, you call the vets, let them know you're gonna be on your way. The vet staff now should be rehearsed in telling you that do not arrive at the vets with a dry dog. So that was some of the data that came out. There was still a high proportion of dogs arriving at the vets dry. All right, so you can, as the pet parent, can start the cooling process before you get to the vets. So the instructions are you need to wet the dog, soak the dog, so hose it down to the skin, or pour a bucket of water over it. Yes, some dogs are not going to appreciate that, but it's going to potentially save the dog's life. And then you sit the dog on a wet towel in the car, and you put your aircon on as cold as it'll go and as blowing as high as it'll go, because you want to achieve evaporative cooling. That's what's going to cool the dog as quick as possible. You know yourself, if you're kind of in a hot country, and I'm sure when I go to Thailand next week, that's what's going to happen because it's hot. You just can't wait to get in an air-cooled shop or something. Because, and you know that feeling, you're hot and sweaty and it's really uncomfortable. Then you get in an air-cooled shop and it's just like relief. Yeah, that's kind of what you've got to do in the car is get the dog as cool as possible, and then to the vets. If you're not as close to the vets and the dog's in heat stroke or getting there, you have to cool the dog first. So it's that strap line, rapid cooling saves lives. So if the dog is fit and healthy, so if it's a young dog, fit and healthy, you need to immerse the dog in a cold body of water. The colder, the better. So either a river, a pond, a horse trough, in the bath at home, right up to here. And so obviously immersion is different to submersion. So you wouldn't submerge the dog, it's immersion. So up to about here, keep the dog still until you see the breathing calming down, and then transport to the vets. The only time you would not cold immerse the dog is if the dog has got an underlying illness and the dog's unwell, or the dog is elderly. So young, fit and healthy dogs, there's no reason why the dog shouldn't be cold immersed. Yes. It's the same with humans, elderly people, if they're in heat stroke, you don't cool them down quickly. It's the same for animals. You do it more gradually. You would spray them or hose them, but not immerse them. Yeah. So I think that's where people are getting a bit confused. They're saying, oh, you shouldn't immerse in an elderly dog. Well, no, that's not the instructions. The instructions are if the dog is fit and healthy and young, you immerse the dog. Yes, you do something different if the dog is elderly or has got an underlying issue, a medical issue. You still wet them, but you just don't immerse them. Yeah. And then off to the vets. So there's kind of two strap lines at the moment. There's wet, then vet, and then rapid cooling saves lives. So those are the two. to. If you remember those, then it's kind of a reminder, got to get the dog wet and as cold as quickly as possible. Yeah. And then once you get to the vets, we'll take over and monitor sort of rectal temperatures and things like that. Yeah. So we've got to just know the difference between heat stress and heat stroke as well. Heat stroke is when the dog starts to collapse, is really struggling to breathe, they're panicking. When they get to the stage where they start to convulse, unfortunately, that is not good news. They will not survive that. They have to be euthanized, or they will die. But heat stress is the precursor just before the dog goes into heat stroke. So heat stress is those dogs that you're probably well rehearsed. You've seen them. They've been in a hot day. Somebody's thrown balls for them, and they're like, the tongue is like this, and they're starting to panic. That's heat stress. All right. So at that point, you need to stop what you're doing, get the dog in the cool, again, wet the dog so it doesn't then get into the next step, which is life-threatening, which is the heat stroke stage of that. Yeah.
Oh,
So I mean
that's
the common things are exercise induced. So dogs out on a warm day, people throwing balls, running with the dogs, cycling with the dogs. Still see this. It's just madness. It's madness. Dogs left in vehicles. I think the statistics from that study in 2016 came out something like 6% of heat stroke cases were dogs left in vehicles. I think we always think that's the higher one. It's not. I think around 78% of heat stroke incidents are exercise induced. So it's people taking them out on a warm day. That is the highest incidence of heat stroke cases, not the vehicle one, which everybody thinks. Yeah.
right. Rachel, oh,
So
that's so helpful. I've got a couple of questions though for you. When you were talking
yeah.
about the immersion situation and you're
Mm.
saying a young, healthy, fit dog, does that include puppies as well? Would you actually immerse a
Yeah,
puppy?
I'll probably be careful with a puppy. I would probably wet a puppy.
Okay.
Because you don't want to. Yeah, I should have included that. But yes, so it's a good question. Yeah, I probably wouldn't called immerse a puppy. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's adult, healthy adult young dogs. Yeah, but I would certainly wet it.
Okay.
And sit on a hot towel and then off to the vets. Yeah.
Okay. And also I think that this plays into one of the myths, but I just want to clarify it with you as well. I have heard that you're not, when you are immersing the dog, that you don't immerse the back of the dog. Is that false? You
But
do
get it
the
right.
whole
Right,
dog.
the whole dog. Yeah, just the head sticking out. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect. I just wanted to clarify that because I agree with you. There are so many myths, and I think it frightens me as a pet parent, and I think it
Mm.
frightens other people too, that you just don't
Yeah.
know what to do, what to
Yeah.
believe. So
Exactly. Yeah.
immerse the whole dog. That's
Yes,
perfect.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
And I think some people will also put the dog swimming as well. But I think if the dog is swimming and it's potentially going in heat stroke, it's actually maintaining heat because it's working. Actually, the internal temperature will still be hot. You need to keep it stationary in the water. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's
So
helpful. That's really
yeah,
helpful. Thank you for that. What are
yeah,
the signs of heat stress that people need to be aware of as it's because you want to stop it before it gets
yeah,
severe?
yeah,
What would
yeah.
they start to see in early stages?
I with my lab, I've got a lab who's very active, and if it's warm, I tend to stop doing any activity when the panting, and I'm just sort of super sensitive about it because I think for the animals as well, even though their brain is saying throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball, I want to carry on, it's up to us to stop it really because their drive, especially some of these breeds, is so high that they will die doing it, so we've got to be the ones that stop it. But I think once it goes past that relaxed cooling panting. So the relaxed, and excuse my impressions, but cooling panting will be kind of like that's kind of nice, relaxed. They'll probably stop panting. They'll probably dropped a bit, a couple of degrees. It's when it gets to that really frantic where the tongue is way out, it's dripping, it spatulates, and it's that rapid, like, and you hear the throat at the back closing, that clacking noise. That is when it's getting to a point where you have to seriously stop what you're doing and get the dog in the cool. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, brilliant.
yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And
And
like you said, it,
the eyes look like panicking as well. They're like panicking. Yeah, it's just not pleasant. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But to kind of drive home the point that you said as well, it doesn't have to be super, super hot for that to
No,
happen. So you need to
no.
be watching your dog at any temperature, really. with how
Yeah.
they're dealing with it.
I mean, brachycephalics in the UK, dog walkers are advised not to walk them if it's 17, 18 degrees. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wise. That's wise. Okay, so we've covered heat stress. Stop it before it becomes heat stroke. Brilliant.
Yes.
What
Yes.
what is the next thing that you see that we should be aware of?
I think one of the other dire emergencies that we see occasionally is probably choking.
Mm,
Um, we do let dogs play with inappropriate sized toys like the balls and things like that. So my Labrador at 22, 23 kilos, she's quite small. She's probably the biggest dog I'd allow play with a tennis ball sized ball. And actually, because she's scent work trained, she only actually sees a tennis ball when she's doing scent work because she goes up about 10 gears. It's like a machine. She's a great working dog. But generally, she has a ball with a rope on. They're the safest things. And it's a ball with a rope that's it's a working dog toy. It's just oversized. It's just slightly bigger than a tennis ball. So there's no way that she's going to swallow it. The thing is with dogs, they're being predators, their esophaguses are flexible. So they're not like a sheep or a horse where they grind food into small pieces and swallow it. They grab, rip, and swallow it whole. So so no wonder these objects go down really, really easily. All right. If you hear that yipping in the background, it's Chili. She's actually asleep dreaming. So
oh, bless her.
it's louder. That's she's on the sofa there. Yeah. So what tends to happen is you get these heavy rubber balls as well. People throw them in the air. The dog leaps up to catch it. The velocity of that ball coming down, which is whop in the back of the throat, and it tends to get just stuck just here. There's a bit of narrowing where the larynx is, so it just tends to get stuck here. When you look down the dog's throat, you'll be able to see kind of that much of it. You'll not be able to reach it to get it out. All right, so you have to dive straight in and do abdominal thrusts, which used to be called the Heimlich maneuver. It's just that we're not allowed to use the word Heimlich anymore because it's got a copyright on it. So it's been renamed the abdominal thrusts. So basically you do exactly as you would a person. You get behind the dog. The dog's light enough, you can stand it up in front of you so it's facing away from you on its hind legs like a person. You basically get your fists like this underneath the diaphragm, which is just under your rib cage here, and hard in and up like that. So you're trying to get a cough reflex from the dog. If the dog's too big to do that, all 4 feet on the floor, dog facing away from you, and this or this again across the diaphragm, and it's more movement in and up like that, with the dog facing away from you. If the dog is little, you do a modified, which is what you do with human babies or toddlers, upside down like that. Slap between the shoulder blades as hard as you can, and you're just squeezing behind the diaphragm, squeezing the tummy, if you like, a bit like bagpipes. So it's like as called a modified Heimlich maneuver. If 4 or 5 times, if that fails, you have to bundle the dog in the car and then get to the vets as soon as you possibly can. This is not going to be pleasant. The dog is going to be thrashing around, panicking. It's not going to be sitting quietly. It's not pleasant at all. But the next step, if that dog does pass out, goes blue and passes out and has got a ball in its throat, you'll have to stop the car. And if you can do it on the back seat or the boot of your car, then great. Otherwise, you're going to have to get the dog out. The dog needs to be on its back. So the dog needs to be at a good level of unconsciousness for you to do this, because these dogs are not going to voluntarily lay on the back while they're panicking, choking. They have to be kind of passed out, if you like. But you have to do what's called the external extraction technique. So with the dog on its back, you basically run your thumbs up the esophagus till you feel the larynx here, the ball is here, and then you press as hard as you can. So you're pressing in and up, and it pops the ball out of the mouth. That's the only way to get it out, all right? And if you get to the vets, that's exactly what the vets will do. But if more owners knew how to do that, more dogs' lives would be saved. I mean, more dogs' lives would be saved if they played with appropriate sized toys, to be fair. But the amount of German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Dobermans, Rhodesian Ridgebacks, that size dog I see play with tennis balls, and it's like, oh my God, that is a choking hazard. Yeah. Anything over that 20, 22, 24 kilo dog, ball on the rope, bigger toys, definitely. I mean, if it goes further down, if the object goes further down than here, the problem is the dog's anatomy, where we're up and down, our esophagus is straight. fairly straight. The dog's is you've got head, neck and body. The esophagus kind of follows that. And there's kind of little curves in it. So if something gets stuck further down, like near the chest cavity, it's not great news because the dog can't dislodge it. You can't get anywhere near it. And even if you got to the vets, that's actually open chest surgery. You have to go right through the diaphragm and open everything up. By the time that's even prepped, the dog's going to be well gone, unfortunately. I mean, if the dog's playing with something and that object disappears and the dog looks fine, it's probably swallowed it. That's kind of good news because surgery to remove things out of dog's stomach is actually really straightforward. It's when things leave the stomach and then get stuck in the intestines, that's when it's a problem, because of the risk of peritonitis. The intestines kind of lose their blood supply very quickly, and they break down, and then you get all the bad bacteria in the guts, which causes peritonitis. Yeah. So stuff that we get stuck in intestines tend to be stuff that dogs find around the house. So biggest ones, socks, underwear, dishcloths, tea towels, toys that they've chewed up into bits maybe, and out and about is things, food items that they find. So avocado stones, peach stones, and the biggie, actually, we had one 2 weeks ago, is the corn on the cob, you know, the bit in the middle, yeah, the corn bit, that because dogs can't digest that, and it's perfect size to block the intestines. Yeah. But yeah, choking. Other things that get stuck as well are things that we give dogs to chew, so pig's ears and beef pipes and things like that. Anything like that should be always given with supervision. We should never give them and then go out to work or go shopping, because those are the choking incidents. Same with my lab, when you get to that last bit, it's like it's like, oh, you okay, and then suddenly it goes down. Yeah, you can imagine if that dog was on its own and it was struggling, there's nobody to help. But I've definitely seen that in my career as a vet nurse, owners phoning, they're coming from work and the dog's choked on something and unable to help.
Oh, I love that you bring that up. And I think it's an appropriate time too to sort of address the raw meaty bone issue, because I think a lot of people are afraid to feed their dogs bones for the very reasons that you've just described around choking. But I think what you're pointing to, you mentioned a couple of things that I think are really helpful, that if you, one, supervise your dog with raw meaty bones, always. I never, ever feed a dog a raw meaty bone and then just leave the house. You're always right there to supervise. But then also, if you're giving the dog a bone to chew on, so if you're thinking recreational bone, that they're not meant to actually eat it for their calcium intake, right? If it's a recreational bone, I would imagine, we use the advice, and I would imagine you would agree with this. It's the same sort of thing as you were just describing with the toys, size appropriate to the dog's mouth. So go bigger than the dog's mouth. Yeah, as big as you can. Yeah.
Yes, without a doubt. Yes. And supervision. And especially if there's multi-dogs, because there's a potential that they fight, or eat it quicker, because I better eat this quick because Toby's going to take it off me in 10 minutes. Yeah. And then a fight can ensue, and then, you've got injuries, because I've certainly seen that with dog fights, home alone dogs. Getting, doorbell goes or a leaflet goes through the door, they react and then get a redirection. It just escalates and there's nobody there to interrupt it. Yeah,
right.
That's unfortunately that is a common occurrence. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Right. No, thank you for that. Okay, so we've got choking. What else is on your list? What's the next one?
I think we need to address CPR, all right, because CPR, even with humans, everybody should learn it, because at the end of the day, it can be life-saving. The statistics are not high, with humans, it's less than 10%. With dogs and cats, even in a clinic situation, it's 4 to 6%. So it's not high, but I think it's really essential that we learn it, because it could be a situation where it does work, and it's that peace of mind, isn't it, that if something does happen, then you can step in. And this is what I'm trying to get across to both pet parents and pet carers that I teach, is that you've got 10-15 seconds to start it, because you cannot start CPR 5-10 minutes after an event while you're and ahhing and thinking about it, because the brain is starved of oxygen. Same with people, that you're going to be left with brain damage. 10 seconds, you've got to get on and do it. So the compressions are the same as humans. So it is now 30 compressions. And you do need to do different types of compressions for different sizes of dogs. So it might be something that if people want to learn more about it, then I think we were going to mention especially my online course. It's got it all on there about the different sizes. But basically, anything teeny tiny, so anything under 2 kilos, like a puppy or a cat or like a chihuahua, something under 2 kilos, your compressions are over the heart itself, and you're actually squashing the heart itself like that. Yeah, so this is around the sternum and you're squeezing like that. Or you can do it 2 fingers over 2 fingers like that for the teeny tinies. The next size and shape would be anything from that 2 kilograms up to 10 kilograms. So your terriers, your shih tzus, that kind of thing, or anything keel chested. So whippets, greyhounds, where the chest is really narrow, deep, and the heart's right in the bottom. You'll be doing the 2 heels of your hand over the heart itself, 30. And the metronome is 2 a second. So it's like do, 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 do. So that's why they use a lot of songs and things, because it's got that 2 a second metronome. The next size of dog would be anything over 10 kilos and has got more of a rounder chest. So this covers a lot of breeds, your labs, your Rhodesian Ridgebacks, Staffies, bull terriers, things like that. So rounder, you actually have to go bang smack in the middle of the highest part of the rib cage. And like this again, everything's straight, so your wrists, elbows, shoulders locked, and you're using your weight basically. And you have to lift off with that one. You have to lift off the rib cage an inch or so, because you want a recoil action, because it's impossible to squash the heart itself. You need to rely on recoil and then the pressure inside the chest to press the heart to push the blood around basically. And that's why any CPR, even with people, has got to be done on a hard floor. So you wouldn't do it on the sofa or a bed, because you need that pressure, the hard surface on the other side, to help squash the internal organs that squash the heart to push the blood around. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So can I just ask you really quick, Rachel, for the smaller breeds, so obviously, so the really little ones, you're doing it directly on the heart. How are you locating, if somebody's like, where exactly is my dog's heart? How do I figure that out?
Yeah, so when the dog's on its side, and it doesn't matter what side the dog is, a lot of teaching, so the dog's got to be on the right side. Actually, within the recover guidelines, which is the veterinary standard that we follow, it actually has it in capital letters. There is no data or evidence that the dog has to be on the left or right. So it doesn't matter what side the dog's that's one thing. The other thing is that when it's on its side, where the front leg is, you just pull the front leg slightly forward, and where the elbow was sitting is where the heart is located. So it's basically between the third and the fifth rib. Yeah. So front leg slightly forward, and where the elbow was is where you target your CPR. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Really helpful. Okay. And so you follow the same way as you would do a human with the 2 beats metronome, 2 count metronome, I should say.
Yes, yeah. And after your 30 compressions, that's when you do your 2 breaths. So you do not start with breaths. I've actually dropped that with human CPR now. You do not start with breaths, because they say you're wasting time. The critical thing is to do the compressions first, and then you do 2 breaths in between your 30 compressions. And with dogs, it's not mouth to mouth, it's mouth to nose. So you have to make a full seal around the dog's muzzle with both hands. You might get away with one hand if it's a little dog. Then you put the whole of the dog's nose in your mouth, and nostrils, everything, and you just gently breathe into the dog. And as you're looking down the dog, you should be able to see the chest rising. And the lungs are pretty clever. They work in a vacuum. So once they're at full capacity, the chest stops rising. That's your cue then. When you see that happen, take your mouth off the dog's nose. It'll naturally break the vacuum, and the chest will just naturally deflate. And you do breath number 2. And after 1 or 2 rounds, just stop and check. Do a quick 10-second check. Any breathing yet? Any heartbeat? Put your hand on the chest. Can you feel anything? If nothing, then you would carry on. Carry on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how would you determine that you actually need to do CPR in the first place?
Yeah, so basically you've got to check your vital signs. So you feel for a heartbeat, like that around the chest. Look, is there any breathing movements? Is the chest moving? Look at the nostrils. Is there any twitching or flaring that might indicate the dog's breathing, and feel for the femoral artery, which is on the inside of the back leg. So it's always a good idea for pet parents to have a feel of their dog's femoral artery, so they know exactly where it is. It's a great big whacking artery. It's on the inside of the back legs. Some breeds are more difficult. So if you've got like a shorter like bull breed or something like a bulldog, it might only be like this area. If you've got a great big lanky greyhound, you know, it's you can see it. You know, it's these see-through dogs. Yeah, you can see it. So it's always a good idea for pet parents to locate where their femoral artery is on the dog. And actually, talking about bull breeds, the Recover guidelines, their guidelines are if you've got something like British Bulldog or something, and they've just added the French Bulldog to that, and any dog that's maybe wider than it is tall, like a 60-kilo Dr. Bordeaux or something like that, you actually do their CPR on their back like a person. So you roll them onto their back and you do your compressions over the sternum like a person. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But that's
Okay.
wide rather than tall. Yeah.
That's
But the
really
recovery
helpful.
guidelines, it's freely available on the internet. You know, people can have a read through. It's really interesting. And they've got a certificate program as well. And they do have one for pet parents. So it's got pet parents, vet techs, vets, etc. So yeah, I did my vet tech or veterinary nurse certification in February, yeah, for basic life support and advanced life support. So that's an in-person, it's a full weekend where you get assessed and you have to do very scary simulation. So we had to do a 35-minute resuscitation simulation. Yeah.
Oh
A
my
bit
goodness.
scary.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm glad there are people like you, Rachel, that can really do that. That just terrifies me. And I know I need to get over that fear, but it definitely does terrify me.
yeah.
It's good practice for being in those situations, for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely,
For
definitely. Yeah,
sure.
that's what I'm just designing a course at the moment for in the UK where, you know, I've got my course that is a full day course, but what I'm trying to do as well is because you're still getting sort of premises where you might have like a grooming salon with like 4 groomers in. They really need to know their drills, CPR drills. So I'm just designing a course on that actually, where I might go in for a couple of hours, recap on the theory, and then just get them practicing and then do like a simulation test. Yeah, because
Perfect.
that first couple of minutes where people, you know, people are panicking. So you phone the owner. Oh, I don't want to phone the owner. Well, you start CPR then. Oh, I don't want to do that either. They've got to get over that, and they've got to get on within 10 seconds. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
something I'm hoping to roll out next year is get a CPR drills course going. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. It's so needed. And like you said, it's kind of it's getting us over those initial fears. And I think it's a bit like muscle memory. If you keep doing it, if you
Yes.
keep practicing it, it becomes second
Yeah.
nature. It kicks
Exactly.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
after CPR, what is something else that pet parents should know?
Um, let's have a think. I think dog fights is probably a common one. You know, you're walking in the park and then a dog comes along and they have a bit of a scuffle. I think dog bites are underestimated. The problem with dog skin is that it's not attached to the muscle layer where ours is. So that's why you can slide dog skin around. So if you get a full skin thickness bite, if you look through the hole and slide the skin around, if you see the muscle layer, that's full skin thickness. It needs medical attention because if it starts to heal, it traps the bacteria, and then the bacteria then is free in this layer, this loose layer underneath the like gap, if you like, and that's why we can microchip dogs and things like that, and then it multiplies, and then it turns into more dangerous bacteria, and then that bacteria then gets in the bloodstream, and then you get sepsis. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So dog bites, even if it's just one, it is worth popping to the vets. Let us flush it out, and then give you a course of antibiotics. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Right.
brilliant.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder too if you might be able to kind of touch on a little bit as well, things like burns, because actually I'm reflecting back on what you were saying about heat stroke. And if people are walking
Yes.
their dogs on hot pavements, I think that's probably the most common burn would be like paw pad burns.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
should somebody do in that kind of a
yeah.
situation?
The thing with burns is that you just treat them as you would a person, really. So get them as
Okay.
cold and as cool as quick as possible. So you need to get them in cold water for about 20 minutes, and then dressings on, and then phone the vet as well because sometimes they need pain relief and antibiotics. Because if the skin starts to slough, starts to peel away, then that can very easily then turn into infection. Yeah,
Right.
let a lot of infection in when you've got pieces of skin or layers of skin missing. Yeah, the other ones we get a lot, well, not a lot, but occasionally is electrocutions, which can burn. So they can burn if you've got a young dog or a puppy chewing wires, like get behind a TV and chew TV wires. I've seen that. They get burns around the mouth, but also if they get a belt of electricity, it can put the heart out of rhythm as well. So they need to be under the care of a cardiologist and monitor that heart. It does go back to normal. It can take a few weeks, but it can be in out of rhythm because of the electrical belt. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. No, that's really
Or
helpful.
puppy proofing the house, yeah. There's a thing, for having the dogs, puppies crate trained and confinement trained. I think it's really important. It doesn't mean that they have to be confined for the rest of their life. It just means that they have that skill if they need to be confined at any point in the house or through their life. If they've got to go to the groomers or the vets or on the back of a car or sit in a separate room because they've got a child that's frightened of him or something like that. I think it's really an essential skill. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know when Lucky was a puppy, he's small. He's only 4.5 kilos as it is. He's a
Oh,
Chihuahua
okay.
mix.
Yeah.
But man, did I become aware of what was on the floor. I've never spent so much time examining low
Yes.
places as when he was
Yeah.
young, because it was like, honest to God, like monitoring his mouth 24/7. What has he got in
Yeah.
it? It's crazy. So
Yeah.
yeah, just giving him.
It's a lot of this kind of like, yeah, we shouldn't be like inhibiting these dogs and give them freedom and what have you, but potentially it's life-threatening, isn't it? You
Yeah,
can't leave a puppy just running around the house. Yeah,
yeah,
they get into
yeah.
all sorts. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
even when you think you've puppy proofed, which I thought I did, and then you're like, where has he found
Yeah.
this? What
Yeah.
where
They,
was that?
they can open cupboards, they can open the fridge, they can open windows, Yeah.
Yep, I'm very well aware of those things.
Yeah.
Rachel, if somebody is putting together a kind of first aid kit for their
Yeah.
dogs to have at home or in their car, or having multiple ones, what would you say are the top things they should make sure to include in them?
Yeah, I mean, I've designed my own first aid kit, which obviously people can get in the UK. So basically, mine's kind of quite big, and it is designed to sit in the car or sit at home. Basically, it is full of bandages because I find that ones that you get from the pet shop or if you get on Amazon or whatever, they've got lots of things in there that are not really relevant to a real emergency. Where bandages is, if you've got like a 50-kilo Rottweiler and it cuts its foot really badly, one bandage this big is not going to stop that dog bleeding. You're going to have to have 4 or 5 layers, and you're going to have to another bandage, another bandage. So you need access to a lot of bandages. Tourniquet is a good one. So and disposable tourniquets you can get. So those are in mine. So it's like the ones that you use for people that when you go and get a blood test, the blue
Right.
elastic. Yeah, those are in there. And foil blankets, which obviously for hypothermias and things like that. And it's a human size one, so it will cover any size of dog. And gauze pads, saline pods. So they're for anything minor that you want to flush out, but mainly for prolapsed eyeballs. So especially with brachycephalic breeds where the eyeball might come out, it's essential that you keep it moisturised. So these saline pods are ideal for that, for keeping that eye moisturised till you get to the vet in case it's
All
salvageable.
right.
Yeah.
Would that be something too, like if you think of saline for contact solution or something like that
Yes,
for
yeah,
lenses? Okay.
yeah, definitely. As long as it's a saline one,
Okay.
it's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, the for me, the more bandages, the better, really, for these dire emergencies. Because remember, at the end of the day, what we started off with is bleeding, and losing a lot of blood is what is life threatening.
Mm.
So you need as many bandages as possible. And I do also sell a little kit which I helped design with a friend actually, but it's only a little one, and it's round like this. It's got everything in it, not everything in it, but everything that you could maybe just stick in your rucksack or it goes on your belt loop. So they're kind of like two different reasons for them really. One for sitting in your car at home, and the little one's just to take with you. It's got one bandage in, a tourniquet. So
Yeah.
it's cute.
Some
It's little.
Oh, that is cute. Well, it's handy to have just so you make sure you always
Yeah,
have it in your rucksack, like you're saying. Something
yeah.
else that I include in stuff that might be helpful for people as well is I write down the vet's number, the name and the number,
Yes,
so that if something
yeah,
happens to me, for
that's right.
example,
Yeah, yeah.
that somebody could find that.
Yeah, what I've done in my big kits, there's a postcard size thing that you write in all your vet's details. Yeah, yeah. So that's included in that as well. Yeah,
Oh, brilliant.
yeah.
Brilliant. This is so helpful. Is there anything I've not asked you that you think that we need to make sure that people are aware of?
I don't think so. I think those are the kind of the main things. I think learning CPR definitely. And yeah, I mean, if people want to access my course, my online course, I mean, in the UK, if you've got UK people,
Mhm.
I do travel the whole of the UK, doing face-to-face courses. So that's a full day. It's usually 9:30 till 4:30, with the option of completing the Ofqual level 3 qualification if they want. But pet owners can come along. It's the same course content. And the online one, people can just do it in their own time. It can drop. There's no time limit on it, and they can just do, whatever they want at any time. Really, it doesn't run out of time. But also, you can't cheat either. Each lecture is locked, so you have to read it. And there's over about 200 multiple choice questions as well, which just solidify your learning. Really, yeah. There's tons of videos and photos on there from work as well. Nothing too gory, but obviously things that are going to aid learning. We
Right.
can't avoid some pictures and I think that's why a lot of people like my teaching as well, because I try and teach like real. I don't use cartoons or diagrams and things like that. So this is what happens. This is what you got to do, and this is what it looks like.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
think
know.
that's helpful. I've noticed for different books, for example, I'm really interested in Chinese medicine and the meridians of
Mm,
the body, and the
yeah,
books that use actual images of
yeah,
dogs and cats make it so much more helpful to actually identify where acupressure points are on the body and all that. So I
yeah,
appreciate
yeah,
that.
definitely.
But
Yeah.
Rachel, where can people find out about your course and where can they sign up for it?
Yeah, I mean, what they could do, they could email me. So it's Rachel Bean, so it's RachelBean at hotmail.co.uk. So they can email me and I can send you the link. Or they can go on my Facebook page, which is Canine First Aid Workshops, Rachel Bean. Or they can message me on there and I can send them the link. Yeah.
Perfect. And I'll have all that information in the show notes so you can
Yeah,
contact
yeah.
Rachel directly
I'll
from there.
send you the link. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. Rachel, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you.
the time to be with us today.
Very
I
well.
think
Welcome.
it's a topic I think we just, like I said at the beginning, we don't pay enough attention to until something happens. So just having it
Yeah,
in your awareness that there is a lot you can do for your dog in the case of an emergency. And to your point, the more you look at it and kind of rehearse it, the more
yes.
when that actually happens, you'll be confident enough to actually
Yeah,
do
yeah,
something about it. Thank you.
definitely. Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you one last question that I ask all of my guests, and you can
Yeah.
reflect on your own dog, Chili, or other dogs you've worked with. But I'm wondering, what do you feel that dogs have taught you about what it means to be human?
Oh, I think, hmm, um, I think companionship and a trusting companionship, I think. And you can confide in them and not be embarrassed or pressured into talking. You can just go on the moors and chat away to them, and nobody's like judging, or it's just you and your dog. Yeah, and you just feel so much better. Yeah, and they're just kind of like um, you feel that they understand as well, and you're just like a problem shared and feelings shared, and yeah, that's what I like about dogs. Yeah,
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
thank
Rachel,
you.
thank you so, so much for today. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me today for my conversation with Rachel Bean on all things canine first aid. I hope you found it helpful. Like I said, first aid isn't something that we necessarily prioritize when we start to think about nourishing our dogs, but it's so important, and I want you to feel empowered to step in and help your dog in the event of an emergency. Like Rachel said, she offers loads of workshops and the iPET Level 3 course. If you would like to learn more, I have left Rachel's contact info and the link to her Facebook group that she mentions in the show notes. I would also love to know what other topics you'd like me to dive into when it comes to nourishing your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. Please let me know. You can leave a note in the comments, DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama, or you can contact me through my website, mysticdogmama.com. Finally, if you're enjoying the podcast and you haven't done so already, I would be so grateful if you would consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. This really helps me to know what you're enjoying, and it also helps with other Mystic Dog mamas and papas who are looking for help and support to find the podcast and this beautiful community that we're creating together. Okay, until next time.